Alright, another draft physics video presentation. So, Daftloday has made 2 more videos. I did want to do a force video, pointing out again how the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics don't explain 2 fundamental problems in their theories, which is the energy problem. And so all of these forces that I've talked about, gravity and magnetism, the nuclear forces, created by these little bits that are more like photons, than photons being electromagnetic waves. It's more like the electromagnetic waves are like photons. And they're just ones we can't see, like radio waves and other things that we can't see. They're in a form that we can't see. And we know them to carry this thing called momentum, this ability to excite atoms and excite matter. And so there's a cause for the things of the energy of gravity and the energy of magnetism. And these are huge, vacuous, non-explained circumstances. The energy of gravity just isn't explained by bending space. It doesn't tell you where the energy came from, what motivated the little bits to move, what causes the acceleration. And in every other circumstance, you expect something to happen. You don't expect this flashlight to move, without a hand to do it. There's no invisible hands in physics, so to speak. No invisible man that makes things happen. You expect there to be a force that makes something happen. And the fact that people have let go of that idea, that they'll just allow there to be a magical place from which energy happens. Somehow they're not hit by something, but they're moved by something. The magnets have a constant, I could separate 2 magnets, with a little pin or something. And their force, they're acting on each other, is there all the time, constantly generated. And it doesn't need an explanation. You people are just perfectly satisfied to say somehow there's no pressure, there's no energy making that happen. It just somehow happens. The magnets somehow want, or something. So these are huge holes in these theories. And then when you add up all the other stuff, the really horrible lensing evidence, the really horrible evidence that is the 2-slit experiment in comparison to the single slit, and the whole idea that the pattern isn't even correct, which may indicate that it has nothing to do with anything called interference of photons, that has interference with the pressure of electrons of the matter, but nothing to do with any other kinds of interference. And then you can go to every one of the other experiments and you have these nice mechanical explanations, tipping point kind of arguments that just allow you to just dispense with all this nonsense. Well, anyway, and then on top of that, so there's all these flaws. I'm very close to demonstrating that the interferometer has nothing to do with photon interference again, just has to do with photons diverging. And I'm going to demonstrate, I think, eventually, that the 2-slit experiment, the single slit experiment, have nothing to do with photons interfering. The pattern is a byproduct of mechanical interactions, and that the actual images, these are actual images being duplicated of the edges of the slits. They're images, duplicate images. Full images sent to different locations based on what the photons interact with. That is, changing just their position slightly will change whether they go left or they go right. Anyway, so their evidence is incredibly weak, and yet they cling to this obnoxious arrogance in these conversations, and they don't make any counter arguments, of course, to the specific arguments made. So the last video, at one point it had 1 thumb up and 10 thumbs down, and yet there's not a single argument in the comments section disputing a single thing I said. And instead I get stuff like, okay, we'll go to the comments section for a moment. Oops, I think that was the wrong button to hit. Come on, baby. So they keep referencing this, well, they, two people now. And, you know, but it's really quite irritating. Looks like there was a new comment of some kind. No, maybe not. Yeah, so this new guy now, so Expose UK, is also now doing this. I'll read it. Why does the physics community keep saying if you detect this slit, it goes through, the interference pattern goes away? Yes, why do they keep saying it when they don't do these experiments? If this experiment hasn't been done and cannot be done, if there is no such thing as a passive detector. Ergo, what is the quantum eraser experiment? Well, I don't even know why you'd even ask the question. In the sense is I point you to the simplest experiment you could possibly do, almost in physics. I mean, in terms of mechanics. I mean, okay, it's not as simple as that, but it's simple, and they don't have a proper. They don't demonstrate any respect for the facts. They can't describe the simple experiments like the single slit and the double slit correctly, and you trust them regarding all kinds of statements about what they're capable of doing in terms of measuring two entangled. Get this, first they create these magical particles that are supposed to somehow have their spines, Siamese twins or something. They're somehow connected to each other no matter how far away from each other they get. A complete fable story. I mean, it's not even a fairy tale. It's such a fairy tale. And you buy into all this crap, and this how the experiment starts. Is some silly notion, some silly definition of reality that, oh yeah, we have a magic crystal that creates these two photons that are twins or whatever, or friends or whatever, blood brothers, and they can feel each other's pain, so to speak. And then there's all these. Then you're talking about an extra 3 beam splitters and 6 mirrors and a lens and you have new rules broken where 2 photons actually interact with each other, 2 kind of different photons, and then you have this expectation that they can time all this stuff, that a detector over here is detecting exactly the same photon that was over here. That they have the machinery to do any of this crap. So yeah, obviously I'm not going to waste my valuable time dissecting an incredibly technically complex experiment dependent on a whole bunch of hardware with a bunch of just declarations of how it works, when they don't even know how a beam splitter works, frankly. They don't even understand that it diffracts the light. So anyway, ergo, what is the quantum eraser experiment? If passive detection cannot be done, how can you still get an interference pattern when erasing the information, again, of which entangled photon went through which slit, which implies the crystal splitter isn't corrupting the path taken, and therefore enabling passive detection to take place because you are detecting only one of the pairs. I mean, again, I don't even know how somebody can logically accept, even as a concept, this idea of entanglement, because it creates incredible paradoxes if you really think about what they could possibly do with these entangled photons to strip information off of them about each other and break the speed of light and do a lot of things. I mean, it's just bullshit. The only way to explain this would be to accept entanglement. Well, that's your choice, idiot. And therefore passive detection can not be done, because when you measure one particle you are instantly affecting the other, and so it's not passive. Well, again, I don't know why it would matter whether it's passive or not at that point. Who cares? You could kill one of the twins and it wouldn't matter if the other twin's going to react, and you still got your detection. So that doesn't even make any sense. Who cares if it's not passive if you have another copy of the same photon somewhere? For fuck's sake. However, they claim that the detector is taking place after the first particle has hit the initial pattern screen, and therefore we can tell which slit it went through via the entangled second particle. So again, You really think that they can detect two photons leave somewhere, go here, here, blah, 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 and they know, they can time so precisely, their detectors are so in sync that they can detect when those two photons are in the same, just hit a detector. You really think they can do that? These are just silly little statistical changes that they're measuring in volumes of photons. And they're drawing these conclusions based on the fact that they find out, because they're too stupid to figure out that maybe one of their assumptions where they thought like the beam splitter created exactly the same photons on both sides, the reflection was exactly the same as the transmission photon, and that they don't diverge at all. Maybe they were thinking, they were expecting the same amount of divergence in those two paths, and that's why they have a statistical difference. It's because they're not smart enough to figure out that maybe their beam splitter isn't a perfect beam splitter. I mean, it's just, whatever. Do as you wish. If you wish to be a fabulist, be a fabulist. I can't stop you. But these stories are so poorly evidenced. Extraordinary claims, less than ordinary evidence, and you're jumping in the pool. And so I can't do anything in the future but mock you. I mean, may my future representation of me, my doppelganger of this video, mock you, okay, for even wasting my time by throwing this vomit in front of me and saying, explain this shit. No, there's nothing to explain here except you people don't give a fuck about a rational explanation, or just trying to outdo each other in how silly you can let your imagination go. However, you claim that the detection is taking place after they claim. Second part, that to me is a bit, that to me is the bit that would throw your charged surface explanation into disarray. The whole idea of sending the photons after they go through a slit into a crystal and claim that you haven't already just broken the wave function seems preposterously silly to me. And now they're taking one photon essentially, right? In theory, one photon goes through the two slits, then goes through a crystal, then creates 4 new photons. That's essentially what the theory of the experiment is. And I'm wasting my time. I should waste my time. No, I shouldn't. I would love to hear your take on this. No, I'd love for you to just fuck off with this bullshit. I mean, I point out all these inconsistencies. I point out how incredibly weak the evidence is. I did the original entanglement experiment that was done with the polarized filters, whatever that was called, the one in the 80s, the one that nobody's repeated, the one where he has his special technology. Okay, his super fast beam splitter, super fast mirror spinning beam splitter, So another guy who thinks he can measure one photon, he can measure it from its starting location, and he can detect the same exact photon 19 meters away, exactly the same photon. He measured when it left, and he measured when it arrived. Yet we're not supposed to be able to measure them, are we? I mean, just. Fuck you. So anyway, I'm deleting entanglement conversations because I don't have any obligation to waste my time going to every insanely convoluted experiment and explaining all the fucking defects in the logic of the experiment. Anyway, I mean every comment just fucking babble. Anyway. So back to where I should be. Well, I do think I have a picture of the suspect logic of the. See, I think I loaded the video. You link to. Oh, yeah, look at that. Let's see it. Oh, yeah, you can see it. So just look at it. See, two greens, 2 reds. That was the same photon. So one photon creates 4 new photons, and then they claim they can put one side of the twin and the other side of the twin, the ones that aren't twins. I don't even know how to explain it. It's so ludicrous because the the twins have a brother and another set of twins. So there's two sets of twins, and they claim they can put those two different sets of twins, and they can make them create an interference pattern on to boot. But anyway, and the experiment, this is drawing. The experiment's much more complicated than even this. It has all kinds of strange boxes in it where things go in and magic stuff happens, and then stuff pops out, with all their magic technology. So, but whatever. Like I said, I can't. If you want to, like I said, if you think that's good enough, fine. What am I gonna say? Believe in your gods. I have no help for you. I'm telling you, there's a clear drawing of a much clearer path, a much straighter line explanation, an evolution theory, as opposed to this fantasy that you people are all, obsessed with. Anyway, let's do this Daftloday crap. So he calls it another exaggerated title. DraftScience not even in the game. Based on what? Yeah, I'm afraid it won't be. He won't do this. He won't prove this. He's got me. Particle theory can't explain. Okay. He won't do it. I promise you. Not even close. So another preposterous exaggeration. That's all these liars do, right? They don't want to be called liars, but that's all that is, right? Preposterous exaggeration is the same as lying. Look, we have hard evidence. We've proven. We've demonstrated. And he keeps doing the same. He's doing exactly what I'm claiming is the focus of these scientists. They have no regard for having to actually prove their case. They just think, all I need is I just need a shred of an appearance of evidence. It doesn't have to be real evidence. And he's just demonstrating that this is their mindset. Fuck proving anything in any real sense. Just declare it. We've done it.
See if we can get DraftScience in the game. Because at the moment, he's not even in the game.
Yeah, right.
He talks about light and the fact that it's not in phase and it's not togetherness.
Yeah, these are kind of important things, right? You're claiming there's interference, and yet there really isn't. Laser beams don't just shoot out. Every photon is marching exactly the same way in line with every other photon. That they all were created exactly at the same instant and all are in phase. Lasers don't even do that. Because the whole idea is the light bounces back and forth in a tube, and it multiplies more photons as it hits different locations where it hits an excited electron. And the whole point is that it can happen in the tube. It doesn't happen just at the ends of the tube. It happens throughout the whole length of the tube that the new photons pop in. And so that's their phase. So one pops in here, that's its phase, it goes into the stream. Another one pops in here, that's its phase, it goes into the stream. So the stream has photons that aren't all lined up. It's hard to get all the little photons in phase. And like I've pointed out, the people at LIGO, that's their obsession with their laser, is trying to get it in phase. Get all the little bits in the laser as in phase as possible because they know it's a real problem. Jeez.
Doesn't even know the vocabulary. We call it coherent light when it's all in phase. Lasers produce coherent light.
Yeah, they use the word coherent to describe two different aspects of light, okay? Not diverging. So true parallel light. And also the issue, so I'm using parallel to do this. Okay, so that's one issue, light that doesn't diverge. And then the other issue is the light having the same phase. It is every pair of photons has exactly, every set of photons is exactly online. The dead spaces are all lined up with each other. What an asshole.
Monochromatic light. Same colour.
Yeah, I've never gotten that one wrong, so lie some more, fatty.
That one. Right. He's been told this before, but will he have done it? I doubt it. Right. And perhaps...
So again, he has no evidence that I ever messed up monochromatic light, ever. So why don't you prove one of these things, right? Just more claims, no evidence.
In the past, I've given him too much credit. See, I credited him with finding out something which I discovered here on Wikipedia.
Finding out what he discovered on Wikipedia, that's quite funny. But interesting. Yes, they're always changing the Wikipedia articles, by the way, so yes, they do evolve. So somebody could read one, now, and then 6 months from now, the article will substantially change, and certainly the gravitational wave page has gotten a lot richer, still full of shit, but it's a lot better than it used to be.
All these scientists are talking about the what is termed the which way experiment. So if he keeps googling two-slit experiment, two-slit experiment, two-slit experiment, two-slit experiment, two-slit experiment,
I really can't believe it. So there's 3 of people now. So I point out that we have this simple mechanical experiment. I mean, it just can't get any simpler. I mean, you're really going to do this. You're really going to force me again to go look at one of your fancy experiments and waste my time talking about every single element of it. Again, you people think the interferometer is the simple experiment, right? And it's not simple, as I'm pointing out. The light diverges. It's a real effect. It's not a fake effect. It's a real thing that happens when you force light in through little holes. Is it spreads. And the 2 paths have a completely different divergence profile. That's a serious difference when you're talking about splitting light. And they have a presumption that the 2 rays of light are now equal but going in different paths. They're not. One's diverging radically more than the other one. Not just a little bit more, like not just 50% more, but substantially more. So I'm just saying. So here, you have these simple frickin' experiments, right? Just slits with light going through it, and they don't have a proper answer. For what the mechanics are, what actually happens, how photons do all of these magical things the photons do. And so you have a simple experiment to analyze where the variables just aren't going to get too complicated. And they want to go to, again, an experiment with a ton of machinery with all kinds of expectations or declarations about how the machinery functions. Again, just like the interferometer, where the assumption is the photons are interfering when the truth may well, and I think I will demonstrate eventually, that the only thing creating the path difference is how much the light spreads. That's creating the pattern. People are just insufferable.
Two-slit experiment, quantum two-slit experiment, two-slit experiment. He's not even in the game and knows the terminology. That it's the which way experiment.
Again, yes, like they can actually do that one. So again, we're talking about they lie about what experiments in the two-slit experiment have been done, whether real detectors have ever been put in front of these tiny slits, if there's any practical way even to build a detector that could tell what slit the light went through without totally interfering with it. So complete canards, because they draw the pictures really big and then they point a little detector, and like that's how the experiment's performed, when we know the experiment is very small and you'd need nanotechnology to create these magical detectors. And we don't have that. And so they can't even explain this experiment reliably and honestly, and he's saying, well, we have this huge evidence in this other, more complicated experiment where we've lied even more, where we have a whole new preposterous theory of twin photons. We've declared them entangled. As said, with no evidence that they're entangled, but no, we've just declared it. It's a fact.
Thought experiment version of the two-slit experiment. Right? Now, this is what Richard Feynman discusses, and all the main talking heads discuss. Here, in 2017, I mean, it's a relatively recent thing to be...
Let's understand, that's not what Richard Feynman discussed. Richard Feynman only discussed making a two-slit experiment very, very small, because then you could take all these this fudge out of the experiment. But anyway, continue.
Able to get access to academic papers at all. Lovely, play that. relatively recently, right?
Well, as I've also demonstrated, academic papers have no credibility. They publish absolute crap out there. Clearly, the ones I've read, they don't carry very good evidence, and if they have some sort of photographs or this or that, that we know now that don't even have to match the experiment. They can just cut and paste that from somebody else's paper.
When I research the which way experiment and do, on better keywords than probably DraftScience does, I get lots of papers which you have to purchase. Okay, so in the past I've credited on the basis of this Wikipedia page.
Yes, science for sale. So even that makes sense to you somehow. Somehow somebody has a proof that photons are entangled and they can read our minds, and they're selling the evidence. And that makes sense to you. It doesn't make any sense to me.
And realised that what it's probably talking about here, about realising the which way experiment, yeah, it probably would not even proposed until 1970, and it says an experiment was done in 1987, yeah, relatively recently.
1987. 1987. So now we're going back again to whatever the guy is. What's his name? I mean, the Italian guy. I forgot. I did videos on it earlier. Okay, like 2 years ago or whatever. And it had to do with because he was using the polarized film, because he's created the two photons out of like some sort of, I don't know, calcium ionic substance or something, or whatever it was. Something you inject energy into it and two photons come out of it, and he declared them entangled, and he detected them some meters away and proved they were entangled because statistically, 1,697,000 photons went this way and 1,692,000 went this way, and therefore it's over the tolerable, whatever he said, that stupid inequity thing, whatever it's called. But no understanding of the experiment. And I pointed out the simple truth that the flaw in this experiment is why don't you first prove that polarizing filters are 50-50? He didn't even do that.
Talking about proposals and doing bona fide, absolute non-interference which way experiments. As discussed by the talking heads, Feynman and others, probably has been done, but it's probably locked up in umpteen repetitious articles and different ways of doing it, with the old shine the light on the electron as it passes, as discussed with, I'll attach the link at the end, as discussed with Richard Feynman.
And again, shining light on electrons, we already know that's hardly passive interaction with an electron. I mean, electrons go wacky when they hit when a photon hits them, certainly by my theory. Photons have plenty of energy to change the path of electrons. As Einstein demonstrated, they have enough energy to knock electrons free of where they're bound.
It's probably so whole hat that it doesn't appear in searches, and it's probably not accessible. Right? What is relevant now is
all right, so now his argument is the internet isn't complete because scientists, okay, the ones who really were the ones who constructed the internet, don't have access or something, and they can't get all their papers online, and they don't know how to make a web page, and what's the argument? Sorry, no sale. Oh, they've done all the experiments and they've proven all the cases. They just don't put any of the evidence online because, that's not what scientists do. They don't publish their stuff. They don't want to be recognized for the experiments they do. They don't want their name to be noticed and that they did some work and proved something. No, that's not like scientists at all. Yeah.
The best ways of getting at the principle and the aspect of complementarity, something else which I've been going on about, which could feature in a search.
So he's been using a term that's supposed to mean something about some notion of duality, that somehow you're allowed to use these stupid, well, when we feel like it, we call it complementary when we say the photon is a particle for this purpose, and then we go over here and call it a wave for this purpose, and somehow we use the word complementary as if that somehow is a word that sounds like just making it up. Complementary is you just make up a premise. Yeah, I think I can do without knowing that word at all in your sense of it. Complementary in terms of oh, that's a lovely shirt you're wearing. I understand that kind of complimentary, but I don't understand your perverse notion of what it means. Um, just as the superposition word has lost all meaning for physics now. The idea that of forces overlaid on top of forces, and how the forces don't interact, and that you have to wait for a material body to measure the forces, blah blah blah, and they've turned that into all kinds of woo, all kinds of spooky action.
So let's read this. A well-known thought experiment predicts detector's position at the slates, blah blah blah. The interference pattern disappears. This which-way experiment illustrates the feature of complementarity.
Right, whatever. So we're doing thought experiments. We can't do the simple 2 plus 2 math and come up with a good explanation for something. No, they have to do thought experiments of complexifying this experiment to be able to understand it. I don't think so. I don't think so by a long shot.
Complementarity principle, that photons either behave as particles or waves but cannot be observed as both at the same time. Despite the importance of this thought experiment, in the history of quantum...
It's just, can't be observed as both. They can't be observed at all. So, why would you even bother wasting your time saying, we can't observe it as a particle, or we can't observe it as a wave? Yes, that's right, but you can't observe a photon. It's impossible to observe one. So why are we using the word like observe for a photon? It either crashes 100% into something, is essentially annihilated for the purpose of observation. It goes into the atom. You can't see it when it's in the atom, and then it pops out of the atom. So the idea is that it's much more sensible to say the capacity to observe it disappears when it goes inside of its house. I can't watch, a guy cheating on his wife or whatever. I can watch him go into the hooker's door, but I can't watch, the actual deed.
Mechanics, for example, see discussion Einstein's version of the experiment. Technically feasible realizations of this experiment were not proposed until 1970s. Naive implementations of the textbook Vidensky experiment are not possible because photons cannot be detected without absorbing a photon. Correct. Yeah, we can't do it. Yeah.
Right, we can't do it. That's right. We can't observe a photon. So that's a silly notion, never going to happen. You'll never observe a photon. Physics will never do it, so no point in even playing with that idea. It's dead in the water.
Shooting
dead in the ether.
2 slits with light, but you can find out the history, and there was a confirmation. We started to do it in 1930, confirm the de Broglie principle of shooting electrons through slits. Okay, 1930.
Okay, so this confirm a principle. There's no confirmation of a principle in any way whatsoever. There's no standard of what they use for the word proof or evidence here. They do this silly, idiotic notion of, I'm going to call every interaction now a wave interaction, when no, electrons can just crash right into electrons, and the 2 electrons go off in their different directions. A completely kinetic interaction can be the explanation, but instead they're going to turn it into a wave thing. And I've already pointed this out. Okay, they think it's legitimate to sit there and say that the Earth has a frequency. The Earth has a wavelength now because it moves at a speed. And everything that moves at a speed, bowling balls have a wavelength. Even though it's a single bowling ball going down the alley, it now has an official wavelength because anything moving is now, we're going to apply our wave math on it. So, I mean, it's just made up. There's no such thing.
So it could well be true that the, let's call it, a little less naive implementation of the Gedanken experiment may have been done. And this is the point here, that in Mendham, DraftScience, absence of evidence, i.e. your inability or my inability to find the paper, the citations, does not equal a lie, a never...
it does when you cite it, okay? If you're going to cite something that nobody can find, and you're not going to provide the citation, that should be thought of as in physics as illegal. Okay, just in a courtroom, you shouldn't be able to say, I saw the gun on the floor and I saw it over there, and yeah, nobody picked it up and nobody collected it, but I saw the gun. It was perfectly gunny, all shiny and gunny. You don't need the actual gun, right? Nobody actually has to produce evidence here, right? We can just cite evidence from any location whatsoever. And then I heard somebody who told me they knew somebody who saw the gun. And then, and then their brother-in-law of that person actually said he saw a knife, but nobody believes him because he's a compulsive liar. I mean, you really think that's the way the process should be, right? You can make extraordinary claims based on vacuous evidence from the ether. It doesn't have to be anything that was ever really done. It can just be a thought experiment, and you can talk about it like it was a real experiment. And that's fucking okay with you. Well, I'm saying the fact that you will say that's acceptable is just a demonstration of, again, my point. It just proves my case. You people are fucking insane. You can't possibly do anything called science or reasoning. You're incapable of it. If you're going to sit there and defend that as a standard, like, let's conduct courtrooms like that. We'll just make up the evidence. Who cares if it's real or not? And we won't call that lying. No, we'll just call that asserting your client's innocence by just making up an invisible man who committed the crime. Anyway, the cat is roaming about, doing probably suspicious things. Hey!
Did it, right? Now, there has been an argument put that, yes, let's allow that it was never really done until 1987, as done here. But there's references here. You can go and find out whether it was this naive shining a light on electron. Yeah. But I've been reading, and I'm going to share with you the titles for you to go and search, and let's see some proper analysis of some proper, not just theoretical physicists.
Okay, so again, just more distraction. I should waste my valuable time instead of proving that the double split is images, and instead of proving that the interferometer experiment is really a measuring based on divergence, not interference. Instead of doing something like that, I should waste my time in the minutia of instrumentality I'll never be able to see. Like, again, that Italian guy who did Spanish, which one it was, who did that experiment in the 80s. He had a little magical mirror part. He wouldn't let anybody see his magical mirror that spun at 7 zillion revolutions per second and did the beam splitting. Nobody's ever seen his magical technology. That's why no one's redone the experiment, I guess, is because he won't sell them the magical spinning mirror.
Experimentalists, most notably Anton Zeilinger, yeah, the noted experimentalist behind entanglement quantum.
Okay, so he thinks this guy is something. So I should go research the experiments done by Zeilinger now. So we had this one guy that was famous, so apparently there's some other guy doing entanglement experiments. Now maybe this is the guy who's doing the stuff under the earth entanglement theory, that was already demonstrated to be another guy who claimed to the world we've done it, and then when somebody analyzed the data they found you didn't do shit. So I should look up that guy.
But he's a long-standing experimentalist and run teams. And he cites others. He's done it in work with others, right? And there are other papers cited. Now, the question is if you can't call a man a liar if you don't dig down and check out all the citations, right?
Okay, so I should fact check all of physics. So every single experiment, I should go do the fact checking with all of my resources and all my people. Yeah, we should be devoted to this purpose. I'll have some thought experiment people do it. I can just have a thought experiment where I just invent some people and they can go fact check, right? Because we don't need to talk about anything real in this conversation, right? We can all just thought experiment ourselves into a whole resource-rich army. I just thought myself into having a nuclear accelerator in my non-existent thought experiment basement. Fuck you.
And what they've found is the way they've ultimately realised the total non-interference with the particle, or photon particle, which is going to go through to the two slits, is they found ways of creating pairs or double pairs, pairs, which go off and are anti-correlated. So they measure the...
Yeah, so More, hey, thanks for telling me the truth, Daftloday. The proven truth that two photons are instantaneously created and they're anti-correlated, whatever that means. So apparently it might be polarization. One is polarized this way and one's polarized that way. But, that's probably what he means by anti-correlated.
One that went off, to find something about it, and by that inference learn about the other one without even touching it.
Yeah.
Right?
So again,
so that's a feature of entanglement as well as.
Yeah. Right. So go ahead. I don't have any help for you. If you think they have experimental evidence that demonstrates that two photons are connected at the umbilical cord still, and they're flying through the universe connected by their umbilical cord, they're magical, faster than the speed of light umbilical cord, go ahead and believe your fantasies, okay? Go ahead and masturbate to the whatever, the Teletubbies. Go ahead. I can't stop you. But you're humiliating your intelligence to fall this hard for stuff that weak. Rugrats. I think that's probably your thing. Rugrats. Yeah. Go ahead. Have a wank.
Complementarity, but it's an access method to test which way complementarity. 3839. Let's just jump there. Yeah? Blah 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 blah. 1987. P blah blah blah. Schreider. Unsharp particle wave duality in photon split beam experiment. I have a PDF on that. You can get that. I click the link. The links here will take you to it.
So again, another split beam experiment. So I've already just pointed out how a beam splitter that's 150 years old isn't reliably doing beam splitting. Okay, not creating identical anything. I've already pointed that out. No refuting evidence of any kind yet. And you want me to trust some other new beam splitter technology. Fuck.
And this 39 link, simultaneous wave particle knowledge in a neutron interferometer. Okay? Go refute those papers.
Yeah, so I'm going to critique a neutron experiment. I'm sure that's something I can set up at home here, and I can do a duplicate experiment. I mean, I have some available neutrons sitting here, and I can, make a slit out of the neutrons. I'm sure I could, find some reasonable way to duplicate the experiment out of, like, pens and flashlights, and, no problem. So, yeah, I'll get right on that.
Yeah? It's not being done. There's no evidence. Yeah? So, here's one that I found cited about a bit of history and citations.
Okay, so because there is evidence of this silly stuff, like somebody wrote a paper, just like somebody wrote a paper declaring the speed of gravity, and it was published, and it had a 25% margin of error. That is, if they discovered the speed of gravity to be 1/3 the speed of light, or 1.25% of the speed of light, they still would have declared success. That's how bad the experiment was, right? That was published as science. So because that gets published, we should just assume, oh yeah, they did do that whole which way thing. They did watch the photons, and when they unplugged the detector cord from the computer, and they weren't counting the photons anymore, but the camera was still there looking at the photons. The photons knew, they were watching, and the photons, I mean, it's just such a pile of horse shit. No such experiment happened because it's a silly premise. Oh, there really is a Red Riding Hood. You're just being a debunker. You're not listening to all the evidence that's out there. And there could be evidence. There could be a paper somewhere that proves that Little Red Riding Hood existed. There could be. Fuck you.
Experimental Quantum Mechanics by Anton Zeilinger. Alright? I'm about 3 pages in, and I've shown this before. I've shown this paper before. I know, and this is what I just spoke about in one of my recent videos about the prediction between neutrons agreeing with the waveform as predicted theoretically. Okay, so there's no ifs or buts.
Oh, there's no ifs or buts. He knows all the devices in the experiment are proven. Just like when Veritasium showed a chart like that, where he showed how the little bits of silicon bubbles made the same pattern, and it was clear from his own evidence that he demonstrated that they must not have counted all the ones that went very, very eccentric, the ones that backed their way out of the slit again. Yeah, right. It proves something. The neutron experiment proves something. We watched a neutron. Yeah, okay, sure you did.
Oh, it looks a bit thick, and what about the gaps? And oh, it's always a bit something here, isn't there? Always a bit. Yeah,
So
there you have it, the data. Go find the paper. If you see,
so all that little whatever that is. So he goes to that extreme to make these little um, uh, whatever you call that. Gee, I'm just a little searching for words today. Just a little bit asshole behavior. Somehow, what that proves that this evidence is credible. That's how you prove it. So instead of proving me wrong with actual evidence, instead of taking what I'm saying, go ahead, show the Huygens principle, show it in, show the infinite number of little wavelets being made, and show the lensing images and explain how you have this giant galactic lens, and in between the whole bulk of the lens, not a single flare, not a single object, not even a grain of dust is being magnified by the rest of the lens. Not a single sun in all of that space is being magnified. No, just this and this. Nothing else. The lens doesn't see anything else. Why don't you go ahead and explain some of that? Instead, you do this mocking thing as if I point out how your two-slit pattern doesn't have the right appearance, it's not doing what the math says it should be doing, it's shaped funny, okay, curiously not the shape it should be, you have no explanation for any of that stuff, and this is how you run away from it, is by just mocking the idea of somebody saying your evidence doesn't fit. And then so you just pretend it does.
serious about seriously discrediting some experiments, then seriously discredit some experiments. Not some talking heads and flavourful, ready experiments.
Okay, some talking heads like Yale professors. Don't point out how the Yale professor isn't explaining the truth accurately, that he doesn't explain the historical record accurately. No, don't talk about that. I mean, don't point out real evidence of the corruption of physics. Here's the experiment where science, by my accusation, shoved its head up its own ass, and I show evidence of how clearly their head's up their ass because they can't figure out what the truth is anymore. Simple history just disappears. We're just going to totally ignore the most famous scientist in the history of mankind, and we'll just pretend he didn't do a million light experiments.
Experiments, as in fringes. So there's another here paper, 1979, complementarity in the double slit experiment, quantum, Now, Physical Review is, a really prestigious paper. So these things, and if you want to prove yourself wrong, start making some predictions.
I have made a ton of predictions. I predict that it will be discovered that all the phenomenon in the slit experiments are duplicates of images. They're essentially images being rebroadcast in different locations. So depending on where the photon goes into the two-slit experiment or single slit, it projects an image in different locations. It's the same image over and over.
Start reviewing the actual things. This is cited, I think, this might have been in a paper, in a journal, so you can buy it.
I've long ago predicted gravity does not move photons. Photons are not gravitationally moved. You have to move them with electrons at a minimum, and so you have to have a fog. You have to scatter light. You can't bend light. You have to scatter light with electrons. Prediction. No other way to do it.
But it's available free. This was accessible on the internet.
So he's not going to just point me to one extremely complex experiment instead of the double slit experiment, simple experiment. He's going to send me to 5 or 6 or 7 complex experiments and then say, prove them wrong. When all I'm going to get in these papers is, well, we made a box that detects photons at 15 meters. We can see a photon leave and we can detect when it arrives without destroying it or interfering with it with our magical powers. We know exactly, we can interfere with it, we can destroy its wave function, but we know exactly which photon it was. It was photon 4,678,942, and we detected exactly that photon over here. Bobby, the photon, left here, and we caught Bobby over here. And they have a box that says it does that. And I'm supposed to somehow dissect the experiment. Sorry. No. I don't have the resources to dissect these experiments, because to dissect them you need to redo them. You need to actually duplicate the results and actually show what happens in the experiment while you're duplicating the results. Actually show how you manipulated it. As you pointed out the other day with the interferometer. Well, I didn't tell you there was a lens and a telescope and all this other stuff in the experiment because that's unnecessary details.
Material. Another proper paper, 1999, uncertainty, blah, blah, blah. You can look at it. Now, where we're at now, all that stuff
So nobody should be surprised that you have to go back to 1987 or 1995, right? That's over 20 years ago now. Nobody in current physics finds these subjects at all interesting and decides to redo the experiments. So we don't have any modern version of the experiment. We shouldn't find that curious.
Old hat. We're dealing with quantum eraser experiments and entanglement experiments that have been the forefront of.
Yeah. So like I said, I have no help for anybody. If you believe entanglement has been demonstrated or proven, that this extraordinary claim has you've been given substantial, even ordinary evidence of this substantially extraordinary claim. I mean, that's sort of redundant, but insanely unordinary claim of magical entangled photons. Yeah, whatever. I can't stop you from being religious kooks, but you're religious kook.
Quantum mechanical experiments, and they exhibit the complementarity principle. The principle which is also at heart of the double slit which-way experiment. It's another way of exhibiting the feature that quantum mechanics predicts.
There's no quantum mechanic predicts wave-particle duality. That never happened. So, no, wave-particle duality was a consequence of an unpleasant side effect that they couldn't be decisive, that one experiment looks like and one experiment looks like. That had nothing to do with, no one predicted any wave-particle duality. Bullshit.
Yeah. So, even if you was to, well, whatever, fail, there's lots of information out there to go and research, you know, the evidence that there is this complementarity in and this is beyond. We know what we're going to get. We're going to get, oh, that's just rubbish, that's lies.
Yeah, well, of course, because yes, at first, I don't think the idea of scientists settling for some notion of duality. It's both white and black. It's both fat and thin. It's both heavy and doesn't weigh anything at all. Yeah, I think that sounds like absolute bullshit.
That's just rubbish, that's lies, that's just rubbish, that was never done, like that can't be right. Yeah. Whatever.
So again, whatever. Don't pay any attention to the fucking man behind the curtain. Okay, I mean, I can pull the curtain back, show you the man. No, we're not believing that. That's a dodge. That was just put there to make it look like it was fake. He's a fake. He's faking being a faker. Yeah. Fuck you people.
What you usually do. This is that paper from Wikipedia in Daftloday, which way experiment, I think that means. Paradox in wave-particle duality. You can zoom in these, do search on that.
Yeah, I can go search the entire internet for every keyword possible and read every single paper ever written, because yes, I happen to be capable of bending time and warping it, and I have an infinite amount of time. I can just dial up myself an infinite amount of thinking and reading time. Fuck.
Terms. Got the title for you there, that was readily available.
Wave
Seems to be
particle
about
dualism and
a different way,
complementarity.
fundamentally different way, perhaps.
Well, why would I care about this stuff? I already think it's all particles, first off. And so all you're saying is find some other experiments to use to prove it's particles. No, I think I'll use the two-slit experiment, and I think I'll use interferometers and demonstrate how the particle theory actually explains how the thing works, and your silly wave theory doesn't. Yeah, it's not consistent.
What with checking its complementarity, supposedly in this paper. Testing the foundations of quantum mechanics with photons.
Yeah, reading titles isn't very helpful. So if you were going to, like that sounds like an interesting title, so you could have maybe read a little bit of that and just give me an indication of what kind of test they're doing. So it might be worth my time to research that, because that sounds like something. Now, clearly, it probably doesn't have anything to do with the truth, because it's just like detecting gravitational waves by, you know, we got a signal that went chirpier, and therefore we did it. We have a million signals. One of them did what we thought it should do, and so therefore we did it.
And Zeilinger and some others must have, in 2005, wrote a paper, 10-page paper, Happy Photon Centenary or something, perhaps also containing citations.
So that makes sense to you. Scientific articles. I should take this guy seriously, Anton Zeilinger. Happy Century Photons. Photon.
To be tracked down, yeah. You're not even seriously in the game of refuting quantum mechanics.
Okay, so the joke is that the physicists will point out that here's the fundamental experiments that led us to a conclusion. And so I cite those fundamental experiments. The two-slit experiment being the big one. I've pointed out how the one-slit experiment is the bigger one, but whatever. And then you got Einstein's theory, then you got the black body radiation problem with the ultraviolet light, and I've explained the nice mechanical explanation that you could have drawn the conclusion. You could have done the particle thing and made a particle explanation. They just didn't want to go anywhere near that. So they created this nonsense. And you know, so I've demonstrated where it went wrong, why the mistake was made. And I've sort of done that with Einstein. There was no competing theory for gravity. Nobody had come up with a mechanism, so he came up with one that you can't disprove. It's an invisible man. I can't pick apart his theoretical notion. It's just a notion of a reality. The magical space takes care of it all. It tells the planets how to move. It pushes things. It does whatever needs to be done to motivate the little bits inside of everything. And it says to the little bits, you know which way you're supposed to go now, because you're in gravity and you're supposed to go a certain way, and you somehow know how to do that with this magical thing that tells you how to go. Yeah, it's really hard to disprove God theories, and these are just God theories. Fuck. But I mean, that's where it started, idiot. So that would be the sensible place to attack, is to show where they made the simple mistake, where Benjamin Franklin made the simple mistake of positive negative. And, you know, not getting the direction of the stream right. You know.
Video, which I'll catch at the end, right? He deals with some naive notions about tracking, you know, some sort of, and when he says the results are this way and that way, yeah, you know what we're going to get. That's a lie, right? So your idea about the basic deflection based upon electron principle.
So just understand that any time you disagree with the bold claims made by a scientist, okay, you've number one called them liars, and number two, you don't have a right to do that. Of course you do. You have a right to say there's not enough evidence for this conclusion. We detected a black hole crashing into another black hole in a theoretically impossible manner, yes, but that's what we detected. Yes, it's impossible that two black holes could ever get in the system we're describing, but that's incidental. That doesn't really matter, right? We saw it anyway.
Oh, yeah. It fails. I've explained how it fails. Feynman explains how it fails. And all it means is, no, you're wrong. Yeah?
No, that's not what I do. I've explained in detail. So he says something fails, so we'll play that again. There's nothing, you haven't demonstrated anything that fails here. Feynman didn't demonstrate anything. He said gravity's like raindrops, therefore it can't be particles because raindrops more than would hit you in the face. So he compared a nuclear force to raindrops, just like you and Piro think water waves in a medium are just like photons. And you think you can make a direct correlation between the two things. Pressure moving through a medium, and you can just make the same exact correlation and declare photons are moving through a medium, this magical medium.
I've explained how it fails. Feynman explains how it fails.
Go back again, go back a little further. What fails? What?
Naive notions about tracking, you know, some sort of, and when he says the results are this way and that way, yeah, we know what we're going to get. Well, that's a lie. Right? So your idea about the basic deflection based upon electron principles.
Right. So somehow he says, Feynman says, photons don't interact with electrons, cause the electrons to change their path, and then a photon is released at a new vector. When that's exactly what Feynman diagrams are. Exactly. Some of them. I mean, obviously some Feynman diagrams have neutrinos in them and all kinds of crap, but when he does a basic photon electron Feynman diagram, it's exactly what I'm describing. Exactly. So somehow he says Feynman's proven that not right. Feynman's the guy in the lecture that says, look, they're corpuscles of light. Its photons are particles. Yes, they can do wavy shit, but they're particles first off. Because they don't spread, because he's logical. He knows the word wave has to be in a medium and it has to spread.
Yeah. It fails.
Torpedoes in water aren't waving.
Explain how it fails. Feynman explains how it fails.
I'll say again, so where is it? Where's this evidence of some failure, some inability for a photon to hit an electron, cause the electron to move a little bit, and then the electron re-releases the energy of the photon when it stops moving? Where has he proven that doesn't happen at very geometric rules? Where?
All it means is, no, you're wrong. Yeah? Well, that's not an argument.
No, that's not what I provided.
Can you imagine meeting?
So this is a grotesque lie. So this grotesque lie again that he's provided evidence of something somewhere. No evidence. He hasn't debunked a single fucking thing. Again, there's bold claims. His own, every one of his fucking videos is grotesquely overtitled. He's the one that has no credibility in the claims that he makes. Zero credibility.
It's just insane. You know, I don't have to believe in your leprechauns and your unicorns. Seriously? Is that your plan of argumentation?
Yes. My plan of argumentation to people who make up fake things and explain absolutely nothing. God particles, and then black energies and dark energies, and magical invisible man, and magical mediums of forces, of electric fields that go this way, and magnetic fields that go this way, and photons are somehow magnetic and electric, even though they have absolutely no properties in connection with electricity and magnetism. Yeah, I think I don't have to accept your completely made up, completely unevidenced arguments for your magical things that are supposed to have happened. And as I've pointed out, even things like your lensing evidence, instead of just admitting the evidence is a lot weaker than you would like to have it as a fundamental truth stated that light is bent by gravity. So you claim you have demonstrated the hard evidence that photons are bent by gravity, and your evidence is fucking weak. And instead of just admitting that yes, we're out on a limb a little bit here, yes, we've jumped on an early bandwagon because of necessity, because it's convenient to our physics to have this cleared up, but yes, our evidence is weak. You won't admit the truth. Instead, you just keep declaring the conclusion. Your God is God. No, your God is bullshit. And eventually that's going to be proven. And what will also be proven is human beings are fucking cunt assholes. Because somebody shows up online, makes 600 and whatever videos explaining these flaws in your fucking jumped conclusions, that you've jumped the shark with your fucking premature ejaculation into physics, and that you should have held it off a little bit longer. You should have showed a little fucking restraint. And then you were even worse than that. Not only you're carrying a bag of weak evidence, you're sitting there sledgehammering people with it, as if you have certainty in your judgments, as if your fucking trial legitimizes imposing some sort of death penalty or some penalty of I will mock your silly notions that we somehow made a mistake. Yeah, you made a lot of them, assholes, and I'm demonstrating that, and you're showing what the price somebody pays for doing that. Being honest and saying, yeah, that doesn't make any sense, and the more I scratch at it, the less sense it fucking makes. Yeah, and what do you do to somebody who does that? As the Borg demands, you fucking lie through your fucking teeth about what you have proven. Fucking asswipe. Okay, so another preposterously exaggerated video claim, not even in the game. So he doesn't think the game is the two-slit experiment, black body radiation, Einstein's photoelectric effect. These aren't the fundamental experiments of quantum mechanics that led to all these fucking goddamn idiotic many worlds bullshits, Copenhagen nonsense, fucking entangled particle crap. Yes, it did lead to it. Getting the wrong answers to those questions led to all this complete made up. First you invent the God, then you make up his heaven, then you make up his hell, then you make up the the rubies around the gates, and then you gold plate the roads, and you have the molestation chamber where Jesus molests the children. Yeah, so yes, it just gets more and more elaborate as your imagination allows you to just keep making up this narrative of the magical little fairy place that you've shoved physics into. Douche. So, next video should be interesting. Like I said, the forces one. So he says, concerning forces, orthodox versus deaf. Yeah, well, my theory is conservative and solid. Their theory is invisible men. It's all invisible ethers. The invisible ether of bent space, the invisible ether of the electric field, the invisible ether of the magnetic field. And then you have the whatever quantum super field of the strong and weak forces. Where, yeah, I've explained how it can all be explained as just a nuance of photons. Photons are the force in the sense that they make the force tangible. We can see what a force is, fortunately, because we can see photons. And so we can kind of understand force. And there's a lot of it out there. Photons aren't the only bit of force in the universe. Idiots. Until next time.